Bran. The morning had dawned clear and cold with a crispness that hinted at the end of summer. They set forth at daybreak to see a man beheaded, 20 in all, and Bran rode among them. Nervous with excitement, this was his first time he had been deemed old enough to go with his lord father and his brothers to see the king's justice done. It was the 9th year of summer and the 7th year of Bran's life. The man had been taken outside a small holdfast in the hills. Robb thought he was a wildling, his sword sworn to Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall. It made Bran's skin prickle to think of it. He remembered the harsh tales old Nan told them. The wildlings were cruel men, she said, slavers and slayers and thieves. They consorted with giants and ghouls, stole girl children in the dead of night, and drank the blood of polished horns. And their women lay with the others in the long night to sire terrible half-human children. But the man they found bound hand and foot to the holdfast wall awaiting the king's justice was old and scrawny, not much taller than Robb. He had lost both ears and a finger to frostbite, and he dressed all in black, the same as a brother of the Night's Watch, except that his furs were ragged and greasy. The breath of the man and horse mingled. Steaming in the cold morning air, his lord father had the man cut down from the wall and dragged before them. Robb and Jon sat tall and still on their horses, with Bran between them on his pony, trying to seem older than 7, trying to pretend that he'd seen all this before. A faint wind blew through the holdfast gate. Over their heads flapped the banner of the Starks of Winterfell, a great direwolf racing across the ice-white field. Bran's father sat solemnly on his horse, long brown hair staring in the wind. His closely trimmed beard was shot with white, making him look older than 35 years. He had a grim cast to his gray eyes this day, and he seemed not all that the man who would sit before the fire in the evening and talk softly of the age of heroes and the children of the forest. He had taken off father's face, Bran thought, and donned the face of Lord Stark of Winterfell. There were questions asked and answers given there in the chill of the morning, but as there were, Bran could not recall much of what had been said. Finally his lord father gave a command, and the two of his guardsmen dragged the ragged man to the ironwood stump in the center of the square. They forced his head down onto the hard black wood. Lord Eddard Stark dismounted, and his ward Theon Greyjoy brought the sword Ice. The sword was called. It was white across as any man's hand and taller than Robb. The blade was Valyrian steel, spell-forged and dark as smoke. Nothing held edge like Valyrian steel. His father peeled his gloves off and handed them to Jory Castle, the captain of his household guard. He took hold of Ice with both hands and said, "In the name of Robert, Robert of the House Baratheon, the first of his name, king of the Andals and Rhoynar and the Rhoynar, and the first men, lord of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realms, by the word of Eddard of the House Stark, lord of Winterfell and warden of the North, I do sentence you to die." He lifted a great sword high above his head. Bran's bastard brother Jon Snow moved closer. "Keep the pony well in hand," he whispered, "and don't look away. Father will know if you do." Bran kept his pony well in hand and did not look away. His father took off the man's head with a single sure stroke. Blood sprayed across the snow, as red as summer wine. One of the horses reared and had to be restrained to keep from bolting. Bran could not take his eyes off the blood. The snows around the stump drank it eagerly, reddening as he watched. The head bounced off a thick root and it rolled. It came up near Greyjoy's feet. Theon was a lean, dark youth of 19 who'd found everything amusing. He laughed and put his boot to the head and kicked it away. "Ass," Jon muttered, low enough so Greyjoy did not hear. He put a hand on Bran's shoulder, and Bran looked over at his bastard brother. "You did well," Jon told him solemnly. Jon was 14, an old hand at justice. It seemed colder on the long ride back to Winterfell, though the wind had died by then and the sun was higher in the sky. Bran rode with his brothers, well ahead of the main party, his pony struggling to keep up with their horses. "The deserter died bravely," Robb said. "He was big, broad, and growing every day with his mother's coloring of fair skin, red-brown hair, and blue eyes of the Tullys of Riverrun. He had courage, at the least." "No," Jon Snow said quietly, "it was not courage. This one was dead of fear. You could see it in his eyes, Stark. Jon's eyes were gray, so dark they seemed almost black, but there was a little they did not see. He was on the age with Robb, but they did not look alike. Jon was slender, where Robb was muscular, dark where Robb was fair, graceful, and quick where his half-brother's was strong and fast. Robb was not impressed. The others take his eyes, he swore. He died well. Race you to the bridge. Done, Jon said, kicking his horse forward. Robb cursed and followed. Then they galloped down the trail, Robb laughing and hooting, Jon silent and intent. The hooves of their horses kicked up the showers of snow as they went. Bran did not try to follow. His pony could not keep up. He had seen the ragged man's eyes, and he was thinking of them. After a while, the sound of Rob's laughter receded, and the woods grew silent again. So deep in thought that he would never rest of the party until his father moved up to ride beside him. "Are you well, Bran?" he asked, not unkindly. "Yes, father," Bran told him. He looked up. Wrapped in his furs and leathers, mounted on his great war horse, his lord father loomed over him like a giant. "Robb says the man died bravely, but Jon said he was afraid." "What do you think?" his father asked. Bran thought about it. "Can a man still be brave if he's afraid?" "That is the only time a man can be brave," his father told him. "Do you understand why I did it?" "He was a wildling," Bran said. "They carry off women and sell them to the others." His lord father smiled. "Old Nan has been telling you stories again. In truth, the man was an oath-breaker, a deserter of the Night's Watch. No man is more dangerous. The deserter knows his life is forfeit if he is taken, so he will not flinch from any crime, no matter how vile. But you mistake me. The question was not why the man had to die, but why I must do it." Bran had no answer for that. "King Robert has a headsman," he said uncertainly. "He does," his father admitted, "as did the Targaryen kings before him. Yet our way is the older way. The blood of the first men still flows in the veins of the Starks, and we hold to that belief that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. If you take a man's life, you owe it to him to look upon his eyes and hear his final words, and if you cannot bear to do that, then perhaps the man does not deserve to die. One day, Bran, you will be Robb's bannerman, holding a keep of your own for your brother and your king, and justice will fall to you. When that day comes, you must take no pleasure in the task, but neither must you look away. A ruler who hides behind paid executioners soon forgets what death is." That was when Jon reappeared on the crest of the hill before them. He waved and shouted down at them, "Father, Bran, come quickly. See what Robb has found." Then he was gone again. Jory rode up beside him. "Trouble, my lord?" "Beyond a doubt," his lord father said. "Come, let us see what mischief my sons have rooted out now." He sent his horse into a trot. Jory and Bran and the rest came after. They found Robb on the river bank, north of the bridge, with Jon still mounted beside him. The late summer snows had been heavy this moon turn. Robb stood, knee-deep in white, his hood pulled back so the sun shone in his hair. He was cradling something in his arm, while the boys talked in hushed, excited voices. The riders picked their way carefully through the drifts, groping for solid footing on the hidden, uneven ground. Jory Castle and Theon Greyjoy were the first to reach the boys. Greyjoy was laughing and joking as he rode. Bran heard the breath go out of him. "Gods!" he exclaimed, struggling to control his horse as he reached for his sword. Jory's sword was already out. "Robb, get away from it," he called as his horse reared under him. Robb grinned and looked up from the bundle in his arms. "She can't hurt you," He said, "She's dead, Jory." Bran was afire with curiosity by then. He would have sprinted the pony faster, but his father made them dismount beside the bridge and approach on foot. Bran jumped off and ran. By then, Jon, Jory, and Theon Greyjoy had it all dismounted as well. "What in seven hells is it?" Greyjoy was saying. "A wolf," Robb said. "A freak," Greyjoy said. "Look at the size of it." Bran's heart was thumping in his chest as he pushed through a waist-high drift to his brother's side. Half buried in blood-stained snow, a huge dark shape slumped in death. Ice was formed around it, shaggy gray fur, and the faint smell of corruption clung to it like a woman's perfume. Bran glimpsed blind eyes crawling with maggots and a wide mouthful of yellow teeth, but it was the size of him that made it gasp. It was bigger than his pony, twice the size of the largest hound in his father's kennel. "It's no freak," Jon said calmly. "That's a direwolf. They grow larger than the other kind." Theon Greyjoy said, "There's not been a direwolf sighted south of the wall in 200 years. I see one now." Bran tore his eyes away from the monster. That was when he noticed the bundle in Robb's arms. He gave a cry of delight and moved closer. The pup was a tiny ball of gray-black fur, its eyes still closed. It nuzzled blindly against Robb's chest as he cradled it, searching for milk among his leathers. Making a little sad whimpery sound, Bran reached out hesitantly. "Go on," Robb told him. "You can touch him." Bran gave the pup a quick, nervous stroke, then turned as Jon said, "Here you go." His half-brother put a second pup into his arms. "There are 5 of them." Bran sat down in the snow and hugged the wolf pup to his face. His fur was soft and warm against his cheek. "Direwolves loosened the realm after so many years," muttered Hullen, the master of horse. "I like it not." "It is a sign," Jory said. Father frowned. "This is only a dead animal, Jory," he said, yet he seemed troubled. Snow crunched under his boots as he moved around the body. "Do we know what killed her?" "There's something in the throat," Robb told him. Proud to have found the answer for his father, even asked. "There, just under the jaw." His father knelt and groped under the beast's head with his hand. He gave a yank and held it up for all to see. A foot of shattered antlers. Tine snapped off, all wet with blood. A sudden silence descended over the party. The men looked at the antler uneasily. No one dared to speak. Even Bran could sense their fear, though he did not understand. His father tossed the antler aside and clenched his hands in the snow. "I'm surprised she lived long enough to whelp," he said. His voice broke the spell. "Maybe she sinned," Jory said. "I've heard the tales, Maybe the bitch was already dead when the pups came. Born with the dead, another man put in. Worse luck. No matter, said Helen. They'd be dead soon enough, too. Bran gave a wordless cry of dismay. The sooner the better, Theon Greyjoy agreed. He drew his sword. Give the beast here, Bran. The little thing squirmed against him as it heard and understood. No, Bran cried fiercely. It's mine. Put away your sword, Greyjoy, Robb said. For a moment he sounded as commanding as their father, like the lord he would be someday. Oh, we will keep. Ooh. Sorry, I'll do something. We will keep. Where was I? We will keep these pups. Sorry, had to get a drink of water. You cannot do that, boy, said Harwin, who was Helen's son. It'll be a mercy to kill them, Helen said. Bran looked to his lord father for rescue, but Ungoliant frowned and a furrowed brow. Helen speaks truthfully, son. Better a swift death than a hard one from cold and starvation. No, he could feel the tears welling in his eyes, and he looked away. He did not want to cry in front of his father. Robb resisted stubbornly. Sir Roderick's red bitch whelped again last week, he said. It was a small litter, only 2 live pups. She'll have milk enough. She'll rip them apart when they try to nurse. Lord Stark, John said. John said. It was strange to hear him call father that so formal. Bran looked at him with desperate hope. There are 5 pups, he told. 3 male and 2 female. What of it, John? You have 5 true-born children, John said. 3 sons, 2 daughters. The direwolf is the sigil of your house. Your children were meant to have these pups, my lord. Bran saw his father's face change and saw the other man exchange glances. He loved John with all his heart, and at that moment, even at 7, Bran understood what his brother had done. The Count had come right only because John had omitted himself. He had included the girls, included even Rickon, the baby, but not the bastard who bore the surname Snow, the name that custom decreed to be given to all those in the north unlucky enough to be born with no name of their own. Their father understood as well. You want no pup for yourself, John? He asked softly. The direwolf graces the banners of House Stark, John pointed out. I am no Stark, father. Their lord father regarded John thoughtfully. Robb rushed into the silence he left. I will nurse him myself, father, he promised. I will soak a towel with warm milk and give him to suck from that. Me too, Bran echoed. The lord weighed his sons long and carefully with his eyes. Easy to say, harder to do. I will not have you wasting the servant's time with this. If you want these pups, you will feed them yourselves. Is that understood? Bran nodded eagerly. The pup squirmed in his grasp and licked his face with a warm tongue. You must train them as well, the father said. You must train them. The kennel masters will have nothing to do with these monsters, I promise you that. And the gods help you if you neglect them or brutalize them or train them badly. These are not dogs to beg for treats and slink off at a kick. A direwolf will rip a man's arm off his shoulder easily as a dog will kill a rat. Are you sure you want this? Yes, Father, Bran said. Yes, Robb agreed. The pups may die anyway, despite all you do. They won't die, Robb said. We won't let them die. Keep them then. Jory, Desmond, gather up the pups. It's time we were back to Winterfell. It was not until they were mounted and they were on their way that Bran allowed himself to taste the sweet air of victory. By then his pups had snuggled inside, his leathers warm against him, save for the long ride home. Bran was wondering what to name him. Halfway across the bridge, John pulled up suddenly. What is it, John? Their lord asked. Can't you hear it? Bran could hear the wind in the trees, the clatter of their hooves on the ironwood planks, and the whimpering of his hungry pup, but John was listening to something else. There, John said. He swung his horse around and galloped back across the bridge. They watched him dismount where the direwolf lay dead in the snow. Watched him kneel. A moment later he was running back to them, smiling. He must have crawled away from the others, John said, or had been driven away, their father said, looking at the 6th pup. His fur was white, where the rest of the litter was gray. His eyes were as red as blood of the ragged man who had died in the morning. Bran thought it was curious that this pup alone would open his eyes while the others were still blind. An albino, the young Greyjoy said with weary amusement. This one will die even faster than the others. Jon gave his father's ward a long chilling look. I think not, Greyjoy said. This one belongs to me. Catelyn. Catelyn had never liked this Godswood. She had been born a Tully at Riverrun, far to the south on the Red Fork of the Trident. The Godswood, there was a garden bright and airy, where tall redwoods spread dappled shadows across tinkling streams. Birds sang from hidden nests, and the air was spicy with scent of flowers. The gods of Winterfell kept a different sort of wood. It was dark, primal place, 3 acres of an old forest, untouched for 10,000s of years, as gloomy as the castle rose around it. It smelled of moist earth and decay. No redwoods grew here. This was a wood of stubborn sentinel trees armored in gray-green needles of mighty oaks of ironwoods. As the realm itself, here thick black trunks crowded close together while twisted branches wove a dense canopy overhead and misshapen roots wrestled beneath the soil. This was a this was a place of deep silence and brooding shadows, and the gods who lived here had no names. But she knew she would find her husband here tonight. Whenever he took a man's life afterwards, he would seek the quiet of the gods would. Catelyn had been anointed with the seven oils and named in the rainbow of light that filled the Sept of Riverrun. She was of the faith like her father and grandfather and his father before him. Her gods had names, and their faces were as familiar as the faces of her parents. Worship was a septum with a censer and the smell of incense, a seven-sided crystal, alive with light, voices raised in song. The Tullys kept a godswood, all the great houses did, but it was only a place to walk or read or lie in the sun. Worship was for the sept. For her sake, Ned had built a small sept where she might sing to the seven faces of the god. But the blood of the first men still flowed in the veins of the Starks, and his own gods were the old ones, nameless, faceless gods of the greenwood. They shared with vanished children of the forest. At the center of the grove, an ancient weirwood brooded over a small pool where the waters were black and cold. The heart tree, Ned called it. The weirwood's bark was white as bone, its leaves dark red like thousand blood-stained hands. A face had been carved into the trunk of the great tree, its features long and melancholy, the deep-cut eyes with red, dried sap and strangely watchful. They were old, those eyes, older than Winterfell itself. They had seen Brandon the Builder set the first stone in the tales they were true. If the tales were true, they had watched the castle's granite walls rise around them. It was said the children of the forest had carved the faces in the trees during the dawn of centuries before the coming of the first men across the narrow sea. In the south, the last weirwoods had been cut down or burned out 1,000 years ago, except on the Isle of Faces where the green men had kept their silent watch. Up here it was different. Here every castle had its godswood, and every godswood had its heart tree, and every heart tree its face. Catelyn found her husband beneath the weirwood, seated on the moss-covered stone. The greatsword ice was across his lap, and he was cleaning the blade in those waters black as night. 1,000 years of hummus lay thick upon the godswood floor, swallowing the sound of her feet, but the red eyes of the weirwood seemed to follow her as she came. "Ned," she called softly. He lifted his head to look at her. "Catelyn," he said. His voice was distant and formal. "Where are the children?" He would always ask her that, in the kitchen, arguing about the names for the wolf pups. She spread her cloak on the forest floor and sat beside the pool, her back to the weirwood. She could feel the eyes watching her, but she did her best to ignore them. "Arya is already in love, and Sansa is charmed and gracious, but Rickon is not quite sure. Is he afraid?" "A little," she admitted. "He is only 3. Ned frowned. "He must learn to face his fears. He will not be 3 forever, and winter is coming." "Yes," Catelyn agreed. The words gave her a chill, as they always did. The Stark's word. Every noble house had its words. Family mottos, touchstones, prayers of sorts. They boasted of honor and glory, promised loyalty and truth, swore faith and courage. All but the Starks. "Winter is coming," said the Stark's words. Not for the first time she reflected on what a strange people these Northerners were. "The man died well, I'll give him that," Ned said. He had a swatch of oiled leather in one hand. He ran lightly up the greatsword as he spoke, polishing the metal to a dark glow. "I was glad for Bran's sake. You would have been proud of Bran." "I am always proud of Bran," Catelyn replied, watching the sword as he stroked it. She could see the rippling deep within the steel, where the metal had been folded back on itself 100 times in the forging. Catelyn had no love for swords, but she could not deny that ice had its own beauty. It had been forged in Valyria before the doom had come to the old freehold, where the ironsmiths had worked their metal with spells as well as hammers. 400 years old, it was well and as sharp as the day it was forged. The name it bore was older still, a legacy from the Age of Heroes when the Starks were kings in the north. He was the fourth this year," Ned said grimly. "The poor man was half mad. Something put a fear in him, so deep my words could not reach him." He sighed. "Ben writes that strength of the Night's Watch is down 1,000. It's not only desertions, they are losing men on rangings as well." "Is it the wildlings?" she asked. "Who else?" Ned lifted eyes to look down the cold steel length of it. "And it will only grow worse. The day may come when I will have no choice but to call the banners and ride north to deal with the king beyond the wall for good and all." Beyond the wall? The thought made Catelyn shudder. Ned saw the dread in her face. "Mance Rayder is nothing for us to fear. There are darker things beyond the wall." She glanced her at the heart tree and the pale bark, and the red eyes watching, listening, and thinking long, slow thoughts. His smile was gentle. "You listen to too many of old Nan's stories. The others are as dead as the children of the forest, gone 8,000 years. Maester Lewin will tell you they never lived at all. No living man has ever seen one. Until this morning, no living man had ever seen a direwolf either, Catelyn reminded him. I ought to know better than to argue with a Tully, he said with a rueful smile. He slid ice back into its sheath. You did not come here to tell me crib tales. I know little you like this place. What is it, my lady? Catelyn took her husband's hand. There was a grievous news today, my lord, and I do not wish to trouble you until you had cleansed yourself. There was no way to soften the blow, so she told him straight, I am so sorry, my love. Jon Arryn is dead. His eyes found hers, and she could see how hard it took him, as she had known it would. In his youth, Ned had fostered at the Eyrie, and the childless Lord Arryn had become a second father to him and his fellow ward Robert Baratheon. When the Mad King Aerys II Targaryen had demanded their heads, the Lord of the Eyrie had raised his Moon and Falcon banners in revolt rather than give up those he had pledged to protect. And one day, 50 years ago, the second father had become a brother as well, as he and Ned stood together in the Sept of Riverrun to wed two sisters, the daughters of Lord Hoster Tully. Jon, he said, is this news certain? It was... What? Hang on. Is that really the next page? Okay. Jon, he said, is this news certain? Is the king's seal and the letter is in Robert's own hand. I saved it for you, he said. Lord Arryn was taken quickly. Even Master Pycelle was helpless, but he brought the milk of the poppy so Jon did not linger on pain. This is some small mercy, I suppose. She could see the grief on his face. Even then he thought first of her. Your sister, he said, and Jon's boy. What of them? The message said only that they were all well and had returned to the Eyrie, and I wish they had gone to Riverrun instead. The Eyrie is high and lonely. And it was ever her husband's place, not hers. Lord Jon's memory will haunt each stone. I know my sister. She needs comfort and family and friends. Your uncle waits in the Vale, does he not? Jon named him Knight of the Gate, I heard. Catelyn nodded. Brynden will do what he can for her. And for the boy, that is some comfort, but still. Go to her, Ned urged. Take the children. Fill her halls with noise and shouts and laughter. That boy of hers needs other children about him, and Lysa should not be alone in grief. Would that I could, Catelyn said. Let her have other tidings. The king is riding to Winterfell to seek you out. It took Ned a moment to comprehend her words. But when the understanding came, the darkness left his eyes. Robert is coming here. When she nodded, a smile broke across his face. Catelyn wished she could share his joy, but she had heard the talk in the yards. A direwolf dead in the snow, a broken antler in his throat. Dread coiled within her like a snake, but she forced herself to smile at this man she loved, the man who put no faith in signs. I knew that would please you, she said. We should send word to your brother on the wall. Yes, of course, he agreed. Ben will want to be here. I shall tell Master Lewin to send his swiftest bird. Ned rose and pulled her to her feet. Damnation, how many years has it been, and he gives us no more notice than this? How many in his party in the message did he say? I think 100 knights at least, with all their retainers, and half again as many free riders. Cersei and the children will travel with them. Robert will keep an easy pace for their sakes. He said. It's just as well. That gives us more time to prepare. The Queen's brothers are also in the party, she told him. Ned grimaced at that. There was a small love between him and the Queen's family, Catelyn knew. The Lannisters of Casterly Rock had come late to Robert's cause when victory was all but certain, and he had never forgiven them. Well, if the price for Robert's coming is an infestation of Lannisters, so be it. Sounds as though Robert is bringing half his court. Where the king goes, the realm follows, she said. It will be good to see the children. The youngest was still sucking at the Lannister's own teeth the last time I saw him. He must be, 5 by now? Prince Tommen is 7, she told him. The same age as Bran. Please, Ned, guard your tongue. The Lannister woman is our queen, and her pride is set to grow with every passing year. Ned squeezed her hand. There must be a feast, of course, with singers, and Robert will want to hunt. I shall send Jory to the south with an honor guard to meet them on the King's Road and escort them back. Gods, how are we going to feed them all? On his way already, he said. Damn the man. Damn his royal hide. Daenerys. Her brother held the gown up for her inspection. This is a beauty. Touch it. Go on. Caress the fabric. Dany touched it. The cloth was so smooth that it seemed to run through her fingers like water. She could not remember ever wearing anything so soft. It frightened her. She pulled her hand away. Is it really mine? A gift from Magister Illyrel, whatever, Viserys said, smiling. Her brother was in a high mood tonight. The color will bring the violet in your eyes, and you shall have gold as well, and jewels of all sorts. Illyrio has promised tonight you must look like a princess. A princess, Danny thought. She had forgotten what that was like. Perhaps she had never really known. Why does he give us so much, he asked. What does he want from us? For nigh on half a year they had lived in the Magister's house, eating his food, pampered by his servants. Danny was 13 years old, to know that such gifts seldom come without their price, and here in the free city of Pentos. Valerio was no fool, Viserys said. He was a gaunt young man with nervous hands and a fierce look in his pale lilac eyes. That's what it was. Give me a second. I'll just need a quick little sip. Hope you won't mind. Okay. Where was I? The Magister knows that I will not forget my friends when I come into my throne. Danny said nothing. Magister Illyrio was a dealer in spices, gemstones, dragonbone, and other less savory things. He had friends in all the 9 free cities, and it was said that even beyond, in vast Dothrak, the fabled lands beside the Jade Sea, it was said that he'd never had a friend he wouldn't cheerfully sell for the right price. Danny listened to the talk in the streets, and she heard these things, but she knew better than to question her brother when he wove his webs of dreams. His anger was a terrible thing when roused. Viserys called it waking the dragon. Her brother hung the gown beside her. Illyrio will send the slaves to bathe you. Be sure you wash off the stink of the stables. Khal Drogo has 1,000 horses tonight. He looks for a different sort of mount. He studied her critically. You still slouch. Straighten yourself. He pushed her shoulders back with his hands. Let them see you have a woman shape now. His fingers brushed lightly over her budding breast and tightened on the nipple. You will not fail me tonight. If you do, it will go hard for you. You don't want to wake the dragon, do you? His fingers twisted her and pinched cruelly and hard enough the rough fabric of her tunic. Do you? He repeated. No, Danny said meekly. Her brother smiled. Good. He touched her hair almost with affection. When they said, write history of my reign, sweet sister, they will say it began tonight. When he was gone, Danny went to her window and looked out wistfully at the waters of the bay. The square brick towers of Pentos were black silhouettes outlined against the setting sun. Danny could hear singing of the Red Priests as they lit their night fires and shouts of ragged children playing games beyond the walls of the estate. For a moment she had wished she could be out there with them, barefoot and breathless, and dressed in tatters, with no past and no future and no feast to attend at Khal Drogo's manse. Somewhere beyond the sunset of the narrow sea lay a land of green hills and flower plains and great rushing rivers, where towers of dark stone rose amidst magnificent blue-gray mountains and armored knights rode to battle beneath the banners of the lords. The Dothraki called the land of Ragash Andahali, the land of Andals. In the free cities they talked of Westeros and the Sunset Kingdom. Her brother had a simpler name. Our land, he called it. The words were like a prayer with him. If he said them enough, the gods were sure to hear. Ours by blood right, taken from us by treachery, but ours still, ours forever. You do not steal from the dragon. Oh no, the dragon remembers. And perhaps the dragon did remember, but Danny did not. She had never seen this land, her brother said, was theirs. This realm beyond the narrow sea, these places be talked of. Casterly Rock, the Eyrie, Highgarden, and the Vale of Arryn, Dorne, and the Isle of Faces. They were just words to her. Viserys had been a boy of 8 when they fled King's Landing to escape the advancing armies of the usurper, but Daenerys had been only quickening in their mother's... Wait, what? Yeah, quickening in their mother's womb. Yet somehow, sometimes Danny would picture the way it had been. Oops, sorry, I had to get something off. Wait. Yet sometimes Danny would picture the way it had been. So often her brother told her the stories. The midnight flight to Dragonstone, moonlight shimmering on the ship's black sails. Her brother Rhaegar battling the usurper in bloody waters of the Trident and dying for the woman he loved. The sack of King's Landing by the ones Viserys called the usurper's dogs, the Lord Lannister and Stark. Princess Aelia of Dorne pleading for mercy as Rhaegar's heir was ripped from her breast and murdered before her eyes. The polished skulls of the last dragon staring down sightlessly from the walls of the throne room, while the Kingslayer opened father's throat with a golden sword. She had been born on Dragonstone 9 moons after their flight, while a raging summer storm threatened to rip the island fastness apart. They said the storm was terrible. The Targaryen fleet was smashed while it lay at anchor. The huge stone blocks were ripped from the parapets and sent hurling into the wild waters of the narrow sea. Her brother had died birthing her, and for that, her mother had died birthing her, and for that, and for that her brothers had never forgiven her. She did not remember the Dragonstone either. They had run again, just before the usurper's brothers had sailed with his new-built fleet. By then, only Dragonstone itself would by by then only Dragonstone itself, the ancient seat of their house, had remained. Of the 7 kingdoms that had once been theirs, it would not remain for long. The garrison had been prepared to sell them to the usurper, but one night Sir William Derry and 4 loyal men broke into the nursery and stole them both along with her wet nurse, and set sail across the cover of darkness for the safety of the Bravosian coast. She remembered Sir William dimly, a great grey beard of a man half blind, roaring and bellowing orders from his sick bed. The servants had lived in terror of him, but he had always been kind to Danny. He called her little princess, sometimes my lady, and his hands were soft and old as leather. He never left his bed, though, and the smell of sickness clung to him day and night, a hot, moist, sickly, sweet odor. That was when they lived in Bravos, in the big house with the red door. Danny had her own room there, with a lemon tree outside her window. After Sir William died, the servants had stolen what little money they had left. As soon as they had been put out of the big house, Danny had cried when the red door closed behind them forever. They had wandered since then from Bravos to Mir, from Mir to Tyrosh, and on to Kohor and Volantis and Lys, never staying long in one place. Her brother would not allow it. The usurpers hired knives that were close behind them. He insisted. Though Danny had never seen one. At first the magisters and archons and merchant princes were pleased to welcome the last of Targaryens to their homes and tables, but as the years passed and usurpers continued to sit upon the Iron Throne, doors closed and their lives grew meaner. Years passed when they had to be forced to sell their last few treasures, and now even the coin they had gotten from Mother's crown had gone in the alleys and wine sinks of Pentos. They called her brother, the Beggar King. Danny did not want to know what they called her. We will all have it back someday, sweet sister, he would promise her. Sometimes his hand shook when he talked about it. The jewels and the silks, Dragonstone and King's Landing, the Iron Throne, and the 7 kingdoms, all they have taken from us, we will have it back. Viserys lived for that day. All Daenerys wanted back was the big red house with the red door and the lemon tree outside of her window, and the childhood she'd never known. There came a soft knock at the door. "Come," Danny said, turning away from the window. Illyrio's servants entered and bowed, and set about their business. They were slaves, a gift from one of the magistrate's many Dothraki friends. There was no slavery in the free cities of Pentos. Nonetheless, they were slaves. The old woman, small and gray as a mouse, never said a word, but the girl made up for it. She was Illyrio's favorite fair-haired, blue-eyed wench of 16 who chattered constantly as she worked. They filled her bath with hot water brought up from the kitchen and scented with fragrant oils. The girl pulled the rough cotton tunic over Danny's head and helped her into the tub. The water was scalding hot, but Daenerys did not flinch or cry out. She liked the heat. It made her feel clean. Besides, her brother had often told her that it was never too hot for a Targaryen. "Ours is the house of the dragon," he said. "The fire is in our blood." The old woman washed her long, pale hair and gently combed out the snags, all in silence. The girl scrubbed her back and her feet and told how lucky she was. Drogo is so rich that even his slaves wear golden collars. 100,000 men ride in his Khalasar, and his palace in vast Dothrak has 200 rooms and a door of solid silver. There was more like that, and so much more with a handsome man in the Khal. The Khal was so tall and fearless in battle, the best rider ever to mount a horse, a demon archer. Daenerys said nothing. She had always assumed that she would wed Viserys when she came of age. For centuries the Targaryens had taken brother and sister, since Aegon the Conqueror had taken his sisters to bride. The line must be kept pure, Viserys had told her 1,000 times. Theirs was the king's blood, the golden blood of old Valyria, the blood of the dragon. Dragons did not mate with the beasts of the field, and Targaryens did not mingle their blood with of a lesser man. Yet now Viserys schemed her to sell her to a stranger, a barbarian. When she was clean, the slaves helped her from the water and toweled her dry. The girl brushed her hair until it shone like molten silver, while the old woman anointed her with a spice flower perfume of the Dothraki plains, a dab on each wrist behind her ears. Sorry, I take a sip. Oh, where was I? Behind her ears, down there between her legs. They dressed her up in withs that Magister Illyrio had sent up, and then the ground a deep plum silk to bring out violet in her eyes, where the old woman fixed a tiara in her hair and slid golden bracelets, blah, 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 wait, bracelets crusted with amethodites around her wrists. Last of all came the collar, a heavy golden torque emblazoned with ancient Valerian glyphs. Now you look all a princess, the girl said beneath. Oh wait, breathlessly when they were done. Danny glanced at her image in the silver-looking glass that Illyrio had so thoughtfully provided. Princess, she thought, but she remembered what the girls had said, how Khal Drogo was so rich even his slaves wore golden collars. She felt a sudden chill, and a goose flesh pimpled her bare arms. Her brother was waiting in the cool entry hall, seated on the edge of his pool, his hands trailing in the water. He rose when she appeared and looked over her. Stand there, he told her. Turn around. Yes. Good. You look. Rhaegal, Master Illyrio said, stepping through an archway. He moved with surprising delicacy for such a massive man. Beneath those garments of flame-colored silk, rolls of fat jiggled as he walked. Gemstones glittered on every finger, and his man had oiled his forked yellow beard until it shone like real gold. May the Lord of Light shower you with blessings on this most fortunate day. Princess Daenerys and the Magister, as he took her hand, he bowed his hand, showing a thin glimpse of crooked yellow teeth, though the gold of his beard. She is in a vision. She's in a vision, Your Grace, a vision, he told her brother. Drogo will be enraptured. She's too skinny, Viserys said. Her hair, the same silver blonde as hers, his hair, same silver blonde as hers, had been pulled back tightly behind his head and fastened with a dragonbone brooch. It was severe look that emphasized the hard, gaunt lines of his face. He rested his hands on the hilt of the sword that Illyrio had lent him and said, "Are you sure that Khal Drogo likes women this young? She has her blood. She's old enough for the Khal. Illyrio told him not for the first time. Look at her. The silver gold hair, those purple eyes. She is that blood of the old Valyria. No doubt, no doubt. And the highborn daughter of the old king's sister to the new cannot fail to the entrance are Drogo. When he released her hand, Daenerys found herself trembling. I suppose, her brother said doubtfully, the savages have queer tastes. Boys, horses, sheep. Best not suggest it to Khal Drogo, Illyrio said. Anger flashing her brother's lilac eyes. Do you take me for a fool? The magistrate bowed slightly. I take you for a king. Kings lack the caution of common men. My apologies if I have given offense. He turned away and clapped his hands toward his bearers. The streets of Pentos were pitch dark, when they were out in Illyrio's elaborately carved palanquin. Two servants went ahead to light their way, carrying ornate oils. The strong man holstered the poles to their shoulders. It was warm and close inside, behind the curtains. Danny could smell the stench of Illyrio's pallid flesh through his heavily perfumes. Her brother sprawled out on his pillows beside her, never noticed. His mind... Oh man, I need to take a sip of water. Whew! Give me a second now, please. Okay, got a sip. Okay, so where was I? Yeah, something about sprawling on pillows. We won't need his whole Khalasar. Damn, I can't even say it. Viserys said. His fingers toyed with the hilt of his borrowed blade, though. Danny knew he had never used a sword in earnest. 10,000, that would be enough. I could sweep the 7 kingdoms with 10,000 Dothraki screamers. The realm will rise for its rightful king. Tyrell, Redwine, Derry, Greyjoy, they have no more. I'm pretty sure. The Dornishmen burned to avenge Elia and her children, and the small folk will be with us. They cry out for their king. He looked at Illyrio anxiously. They do, don't they? They are your people, and they are in love with you as well. Magister, Illyrio said amiably. In the holdfast all across the realm, men lift secret toasts to your health, while women sew dragon banners and hide them against the day of your return from across the water. He gave a massive shrug. Or so my agents tell me. Danny had no agents, no way of knowing what anyone was doing or thinking across the narrow sea, but she mistrusted Illyrio Sweetwoods as she mistrusted everything about Illyrio. Her brother was nodding eagerly. However, I shall kill the usurper myself. he promised, who had never killed anyone, as he killed my brother Rhaegar and Lannister. 2. The Kingslayer for what he did to my father. That would be the most fitting, Magister Illyrio said. Dany saw the smallest hint of smile playing across his full lips, but her brother did not notice. Nodding, he pushed back the curtain and stared off into the night. And Dany knew he was fighting the Battle of the Trident once again. The nine-towered manse of Khal Drogo sat beside the waters of the bay, its high brick walls overgrown with pale ivy. It had been given to the Khal by the magisters of Pentos, Illyrio told them. The free cities were always generous with the horse lords. It's not what we fear, these barbarians, Illyrio explained with a smile. The Lord of Light would hold our city walls against a million Dothraki. Or so the Red Priest promised. Yet why take chances when their friendship comes so cheap? Their palanquin was stopped at the gate and the curtains pulled roughly back by one of the house guards. He had the copper skin and dark almond eyes of Dothraki, but his face was hairless and he wore a spiked bronze cap of the Unsullied. He looked over them coldly. Magister Illyrio growled something to him in the rough Dothraki tongue. The guardsman replied in the same voice and waved them through the gates. Then he noticed her brother's hand was clenched tightly around the hilt of his borrowed sword. He looked almost frightened as she felt. Insolent eunuch, Viserys muttered as the palanquin lurched up toward the manse. Magister's Illyrio's words were, honey. Many important men will be at the feast tonight. Such men have enemies. The Khal must protect his guests, yourself chief among them. Your grace, no doubt the usurper will pay well for your head. Oh yes, Viserys said darkly. He has tried, Illyrio. I promise you that. His hired knives follow us everywhere. Oh! Ugh, I am of the last dragon. He will not sleep easy while I live. The palanquin slowly stopped. Okay. Ooh, excuse me. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay, the curtains were thrown back and Slave offered a hand to help Daenerys out. His collar, she noted, was ordinary bronze. Her brother followed, one hand still clenched hard around his sword hilt. It took 2 strong men to get Mance Illyrio back on his feet. Inside the manse, the air was heavy with the scent of spices, pinchfire, sweet lemon, cinnamon. They were escorted across this entry hall where a mosaic of a colored glass depicted Doom of Valyria oil burned in the black iron lanterns all along the walls. Beneath an arc of twinning stone leaves a eunuch saying they're coming. Viserys of the House Targaryen, the third of his name, he called in high sweet voice, King of Andals and the Royer, the first man and the Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. His sister Daenerys Stormborn, Princess of Dragonstone, his honorable host Ilio Mopatis, Magister of the free city of Pentos. They stepped past the eunuch into a pillared courtyard overgrown in pale ivy. Moonlight painted the leaves in shades of bone and silver. As the guests drifted among them, many were Dothraki horse lords, big men with red-brown skin, their drooping mustachios bound in metal rings, and their black oiled and braided Their black hair oiled and braided and hung with bells. Yet among them moved. Oh my god, I can't even read now. Where was I? Hang on. Yet among them moved bravos and sellswords from Pentos and Myr and Tyrosh, and a red piece even fatter than Illyrio, hairy men from the port of Eben, the lords of the Summer Isles, with the skin as black as ebony. Daenerys looked at them all in wonder, and realized, with a sudden start of fear, that she was the only woman there. Illyrio whispered to them, "Those 3 are Drogon's blood riders there. By the pillar is Khal Morro, with his son Rhorgo. The man with the green beard is the brother to Archon of Tyrosh. The man behind him is Ser Jorah Mormont." The Alysanne called Daenerys a knight, no less, Illyrio smiled through his beard. "Anointed with the 7 oils by the High Scepter himself. What is he doing here?" she blurted. "Your scepter went at his head," Illyrio told him. "Some trifling in front. He sold some poachers to a Tyroshi slaver instead of giving them to the Night's Watch. Absurd law. A man should be able to do as he likes with his own cattle. I shall wish to speak with Ser Jorah before the night is done," her brother said. Dany found herself looking at the knight curiously. He was an older man, past 40 and balding, but he was still strong and fit. Instead of silks of cotton, he wore wool and leather. His tunic was dark green and embroidered with the likeness of a black bear sitting on 2 legs. She was still looking at this strange man from the homeland she had never known when Magister Illyrio placed a moist hand on her bare shoulder. "Over there, sweet princess," he whispered. "There is Karl himself." Danny wanted to run and hide, but her brother was looking at her, and if she displeased him, she knew she would wake the dragon. Anxiously, she turned and looked at the man. Viserys hoped would ask her to wed her before the night was done. The slave girl had not been far wrong. She thought Khal Drogo was a head taller than the tallest man in the room, yet somehow the light on his feet and graceful as the panther in Illyrio's Mandarin. He was younger than she thought, no more than 30. His skin was the color of polished copper, his thick mustachio bound with gold and bronze rings. "I must go and make my submissions," Magister Illyrio said. "Wait here, I shall bring him to you." Her brother took her by the arm, and Illyrio waddled over to the Khal, his fingers squeezing so hard they hurt. "Do you see his braids, sweet sister?" Drogo's braids was black as midnight and heavy with scented oil, hung with tiny bells and rang softly as he moved. It swung well past his belt, below even his buttocks, and the end of it brushing against the back of his thighs. "You see how long it is?" Viserys said. "When the Dothraki are defeated in combat, they cut off their braids in disgrace so the world will know their shame. Khal Drogo has never lost a fight. He is Aegon of the Dragonlord. Come again, and you will be his queen." Then he looked at Khal Drogo. His face was hard and cruel. His eyes as cold as dark as onyx. Her brother hurt her sometimes when she woke the dragon, but he did not frighten her by the way this man frightened her. "I don't want to be his queen," she heard herself in a small, thin voice. "Please, please, Viserys, I don't want to. I want to go home." "Home?" Oh, he kept his voice low, but she could hear the fury in his. "How are we going to go home, sweet sister? They took our home from us." He drew her into the shadows out of sight, his fingers digging her skin. "How are we to go home?" repeated, meaning King's Landing and Dragonstone, all the realm they had lost. There he had only met their rooms and Illyrio's estate. No true home, surely, though they all had. But her brother did not want to hear that. There was no home for him. Even the big house with the red door had not been home for him. His fingers dug harder into her arm, demanding an answer. "I don't know," she said, at least her voice breaking. Tears welled in her eyes. "I do," said Charlie. "We go home with an army, sweet sister. We call Drogo's army, and this is how we go home. Maybe we must wed him and bed him for that you will." He smiled. "I'll let his whole Khalasar fuck you, if need be, sweet sister. All 40,000 men and their horses too, if that's what it took to get my army. Be grateful it is only Drogo, and the time you may even learn to like him. Now dry your eyes. Illyrio is bringing him over, and he will not see you crying." Danny turned and saw that was true. Magister Illyrio, all smiles and bows, was escorting Khal Drogo over to where they stood. She brushed away unfallen tears with the back of her hand. "Smile, Viserys said, whispered nervously, his hand falling to the hilt of his sword. "And stand up straight. Let him see that you have breast. Gods know you have little enough as it is." Daenerys smiled and stood up straight. And that's where I'm going to end it for tonight, guys. I think I read pretty good. I think I got pretty far. Ooh. And actually, it doesn't really look like I did, but I'm happy I did. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Good night.